We're back and ready to discuss story number 8 in our review of the year's biggest stories. It's the emergence of chemical contamination in groundwater near our 2 Air Force bases here in New Mexico. The harmful chemical is known as PFAS, PFAS, and it's been linked to an increase in cancer risks. Although the extent of the harmfulness is not fully known, it's found in a number of things, though, including fire retardant foam used by the Air Force crews. The state is currently suing the federal government for dragging its feet on the cleanup, Gwyneth, as you know. All 3 of our choices, by the way, are ongoing stories. This one feels like it's going to be around for a while. What strikes you about this situation?
You know what strikes me is that people look at New Mexico's vast, uninterrupted stretches of natural beauty, and we think it's so pristine. But under the surface, we've got, fracking, all sorts of extraction industries. We've got not only Air Force chemicals in one way or another, but these giant dairy herds threatened by the PFAS are also a massive threat to groundwater contamination. So it's sort of an illusion that we are not constantly bombarded with threats to land and water.
Andy, this puts the state in a real pickle when you really think about it. There's only so tough you can get with the federal government, but you have to be tough with the federal government to get some movement on these things. It's been years since we've really gotten something going here. A lot of denial, a lot of not getting there. What turned the key this year in your view? What happened?
I think Gwyneth kind of touched on it, is the dairy farmers. I think it became a big thing when the dialogue changes, where normally it's the environmental groups that are saying this is unsafe, and now all of a sudden you have people that really depend on clean water, and we really depend on them having clean water as a state. And so I think that's kind of where it was like, oh wait, we need to take care of this.
Jess, it's called a bioaccumulative chemical is what this PFAS is, meaning it stays in your body forever. Same goes for animals we were just talking about. That's no small thing.
Goes up the food chain.
Exactly right. So again, I say the state is in a really difficult spot where they can't make these people do this, but they have to in a way for our own benefit. So where does that leave the state and our engineers and everybody else that has to deal with this?
Somebody said tough pickle. I'm gonna go with that as well. When we talk about PFAS and we talk about the contamination and the worries that go along with it, it's more than just industry. We're talking about water supplies that feed people. And given the place where you find these, right, Holloman Air Force Base, Cannon Air Force Base, we're talking about people. So I think that when you move towards a discussion about how can we pressure them into taking action, what more can we do besides the lawsuit, you'll have to take into consideration how do you move these people in that direction towards the truth of this is something that is truly harmful for our communities.
Right. We saw that this year here in Albuquerque, we're actually the past couple of years, with the plume from the Air Force Base, Steve, down here moving towards our water supply. And you would have thought that would have been enough to get the federal government to really get moving, but it really wasn't. It's really difficult.
And you know what surprises me? Until this spring, the Secretary of the Air Force was Heather Wilson.
Right. Good reminder. Yep.
And still, I'm not blaming Heather on the plume or the problems, but the Air Force has been stonewalling, stalling. Meanwhile, you have screaming liberal tree huggers like Walter Bradley, former lieutenant governor under Gary Johnson. He's taken a big stand to have the feds do something about it, and rightfully so.
It shouldn't be surprising. He's a Republican, lifelong certainly,
right.
But clean water is clean water. It's not a Republican or Democratic issue.
And he works with the dairy farmers.
Exactly right.
He's
exactly
a lobbyist for the dairy industry now,
and
he's trying to take care of his folks. So I'm glad he's making noise.
Yeah. Gwyneth, interestingly, the EPA has not set a federal standard for this. It's only a health advisory level. That's amazing. Again, it's a question that can't be answered, and I apologize for asking it, but how do we get to the next level here? This is a serious issue for New Mexicans and farmers and everybody else that, and perhaps this is the opening, this EPA standard, something our delegation can lean on these folks. Who knows?
Yeah, I don't know anything about the science of it.
Yeah.
I think the state was right to sue the feds. I think that does, give them a serious kick in the pants. I think people need to kick and scream a whole lot more. And I think we need to think more deeply about the impact of of what we do above ground on what happens below it.
I love that. You know, we do our series here, as you guys know, called Our Land. Laura Paskus, our wonderful colleague, does that, and a lot of things that she's highlighted get to right what Gwyneth just said just then. We have this image here that is so pristine and so beautiful, and we rely on that image to make our money, to attract people here. That ability, Andy, to switch gears and get very serious about what's not working well. Again, I blame the feds here a lot, but how much do we have to internalize for blame here? Is there something on the New Mexico side that we could have done better or differently?
I'm not sure that we could. I mean, if
Yeah.
you're talking about actual spills from the Air Force, clearly there's something happening there that even state officials are not quite sure what's happening, why they're dragging their feet. I would question whether we actually knew that this stuff was being spilled into the groundwater until we kind of got in there and started looking at it. So I don't know what the state can do besides just pushing them to.
Were we supposed to be monitoring?
Well, that's
more?
the thing
Did we
is-
fall down
right.
on that job? I don't know.
That's the
right.
thing is that we kind of assume that it's it's their land they're leasing from us. They're doing their thing, and we
Right.
kind of trust that they are doing it the right way.
That's right. You know, just to finish up this subject, the idea of the environment in total in New Mexico. It was a tough year, 2019. We had a lot of revelations about a lot of things, as Gwyneth mentions, that are not too lovely, if you want to put it out there for tourist consumption. Change in attitude here about these things. We have a lot more vigor when it comes to correcting these actions now, certainly.
You know, yes, vigor. I think we're all a lot more aware and listening to some of those outside voices, the environmentalist groups, the community groups that are getting together and talking about these items. One of the things that struck me, so at Holloman Air Force Base, they closed Holloman Lake because the number of PFAS there was just this extreme number. And nobody really knew what to make of that because there's no health guidelines for that, right? Just don't drink the water, and if you get in it, wash yourself off. But nobody's talking about the wildlife drinking that water. Nobody's talking about the water filtration down below that into the Ogallala aquifer. Nobody's really talking about how do you explain that to tourists who come to New Mexico to enjoy our great outdoors.
Right.
You can look at it, but don't jump in it.
That's right.
So it's a huge question of what image do we want to continue to pursue, and how do we get cooperation from the next level to help us to protect those industries.
Well put. You know, it's interesting, especially when you factor in we're now starting a big program to attract people here for our outdoor recreation. We have to get those two things straight. Steve, you know, some might say there is a certain cost that comes with housing these installations here in New Mexico. I've had people put to me that, look, things happen when you're running lots of planes and things and air, you know, that we have to learn how to live with this kind of stuff. And the pushback is always, now wait a minute. This is our state. I understand it's federal government land, but this is our state. They can't just do what they want. Again, I'm asking about attitude and changes. And is that cost? How much are we willing to pay at some level?
Yeah, I think, you know, I remember a few years ago when Cannon Air Force Base was being threatened, and our whole congressional delegation, which at that point was Democrats and Republicans, fought hard to, you know, to keep it here, and rightfully so. But you're right. I think maybe now we can maybe look at some impacts, and not every environmental threat is you know, fake news and you know, craziness.
That's right. Interesting point there. We'll have to see how 2020 shapes up because, again, these are continuing stories. And like you said, those communities, those local folks dealing with this is the ground zero. That's where folks are really.
What's interesting when we continue to talk about it is that we're talking about ground contamination, groundwater, and that is the entire underground portion of New Mexico, and it goes much further than just those bases. It's seeping into areas where we're now fracking. And so how does that challenge those industries?
That's right. And that's the tale yet to be told. Exactly right. On to our next topic. As the country marches towards not only an election next year, but a very important census count, the official U.S. population dictates everything from funding for federal programs to representation in Congress, as you know. And here in New Mexico, there's a concern about an undercount. And Jess, why is that important, the undercount part?
Well, I think that you kind of hit it on the head there when we talk about federal funding. How many of our rural communities are reliant upon that? How much are we getting from the federal level that we would potentially miss out on? One of the great examples of journalism that I've read so far is out of Ruidoso. We're talking about Lincoln County saying no to federal money to help promote an accurate count in that county, and what that money could potentially do, and that's millions of dollars for rural county. And I think that plays out a lot more throughout the entire state.
Steve, pick up on that. I want some other things here about census, but I want to stay on that for a quick second. That's interesting because that Ruidoso News report you mentioned, Jess, that's interesting to me. The team leaders being quoted about undercounting, it's almost like we're getting comfortable with even just the very idea that we might even have an undercount. Do you know what I mean? There's something about that just doesn't feel quite
And part
there.
of it is the federal administration, to be specific, Donald Trump, seems outright hostile to the census itself. You know, there've been plenty of conservative presidents in my lifetime, but none of them were hostile. You know, there's always some. Well, are we going to count illegal aliens or whatever? But he seemed, he makes up stories about how. Yeah, they're going to ask you questions about how many toilets you have in your house, and
Which they used to ask for a long time.
And which we know, according to him recently, you have to flush 10 times just to make it work. It's hard to deal with, and his cult of personality is so strong. A lot of people, including elected officials on his side, just go along with what he says. It's truth, and anything else is fake.
You know, Gwyneth, this begs a question, listening to Steve. Is our delegation on this as vigorously as they should be, in your view?
Well, yeah. I mean, Senator Udall was here with the Census Director, Stephen Dillingham, earlier this year, and I walked around a community outside of Los Lunas with them, and I was kind of surprised how much detailed knowledge Udall had of it. I mean, I shouldn't. He's been involved in it for a long time. But he was working really hard to persuade Director Dillingham that New Mexico needs extra help in doing the count, and in showing him places like these, unpaved communities that are unplatted. There are many of them here in New Mexico. I think that our elected officials from the top to the very bottom are, for the most part, very engaged because they all have something to gain.
The governor, of course, at the beginning of all this came out with a group to follow this along. It's working very well together by all indications. It seems like it's getting there. But again, if you're talking about each person, meaning undercount is at $3,700 in federal funding, we're talking potentially tons of money with even a mild undercount. You know what I mean? This gets very, very tricky, and let alone things like African American census is a very tricky thing here. Other ethnicities is a very tricky thing here. You see what I mean?
Yeah, I think
this is all still to kind of come together.
Tribal communities is a big thing here too.
Yep.
I mean, and just speaking about our state and talking about Lincoln County, it's very rural, not a tribal community, but it's very far apart. So if you're actually talking and actually trying to reach out to those people, it's not like walking a neighborhood. And then you throw into the mix the tribal communities where they are isolated in their own communities, and then trying to reach out to them and try to explain to them that this is good if you just It's a weird thing. I don't think people are comfortable with sharing information.
I'll go back to Gwyneth for a sec. Did Senator Udall talk about that with the census fellow when he was here? Did he talk about tribal counts and such? Was that part of it?
Native communities are treated very differently in the census because they are so hard to count, and there's almost a parallel system. Most of the communities are asked how they want to be counted, and here in New Mexico, most of them don't ever get anything in the mail. They just send people straight out. They do try to hire people from local communities so that it's someone vaguely familiar who comes to your house, or someone who lives in your neighborhood and can say, well, I live 5 blocks away, or I also live, on the Pueblo. And so they have many, many strategies to try to do it.
Interesting. Steve, you've been around for a couple of census or two here in New Mexico. Does anything feel familiar or unfamiliar from what you've gleaned from the past watching census counts here? Is something markedly different how we're doing it?
Well, like I said earlier, it's just the fact that the executive branch of the federal government seems anti-census. And seems to be trying to spread paranoia. And, a lot of anti-government fanatics subscribe to that. And, don't give them any information. Don't tell them how many times you flush your toilet.
Right.
That's the big difference I see.
Okay. Speaking of information, I want to start with Jessica on this one. You all can take a cut at this if you would like to. The citizenship question. Remember that big debate? Yep. It didn't happen, did not get on the census. But I'm curious if there was any In all y'all's view here, any kind of bounce from that, but even just the idea of it might have shrunk some people back from participating perhaps a little bit.
Yes, I think that's pretty accurate, because when you start talking about something as I don't want to use the word diabolical, as citizenship, right? Even just the mention of it and the possibility that they can glean that from other questions inside the census is a put off for anyone who's taking it. When you're talking about communities, for example, like Carlsbad, where we have this huge influx of population working in our oil fields, and many of them are undocumented workers going out every day, and you're asking them to participate in this. There is a terror there, I think. There is a huge terror there. So I think even just the mention of, even just the previous discussion of we want to know has really chilled the reception in some areas.
Andy, pick up on that if you would as well.
Yeah, I think she has really great points there that I think even before talk about putting this question on there, they probably would have been, just like Steve was talking about the anti-government people. That's what they have in common. It's like, wait, the federal government's handing me a piece of paper in the mail or in person, and I have to. People don't even want to look at it because they're like, what are you trying to get here from us? So I don't even know if the question. Definitely the question sparked some fear, but I think that fear would have been there even if we didn't talk about that question.
Yeah. Gwyneth, your thought on that one too, the citizenship question.
I think they estimated that it had the potential to depress the count by as much as 5%.
Wow.
And that was going to be potentially really dangerous for us. But I think it also energized local groups, and there are a lot of community groups out there who are very mobilized in getting the word out there. I mean, we talk to people who own a convenience store who are willing to talk to every customer who comes in, a lot of whom may be undocumented, and tell them, like, this is important. We need roads, we need bridges, we need a water system, we don't have a sewer system out here, and if we aren't counted, we don't get that money. And I think that message really resonates in a lot of areas.
Where does redistricting fit into this, by the way? Gotta
It's
ask you.
huge.
Yeah.
If you're not counted, that means you're not a warm body who lives in that area, right? So, you know, from a political perspective, it's extremely important that people do get counted because then they exist and their district is properly sized.
Good point there. Let's see what happens. It's going to be interesting. I just find this whole situation. I mentioned African American community. There's a lot of vigor going there too. We don't want to miss anybody this time around. It's going to be very, very tricky. I just don't know how it can happen. In your view, Steve, have we thrown enough money at this? Because it costs money to fully do a census count.
I'm not sure we have. Was there a recent story saying about the requested money was not nearly as much as the one?
Depends on who you ask. That's certainly, yeah.
Yeah. So no, that and the people in power in Washington, want to keep it that way.
That's right.
We're discouraging people from going to the census. Well, gee, that's too bad.
Yep. Want to pick up on that? We'll finish with you on the money question. There's some talk about there
was.
Yeah.
So one of the mechanisms that's really interesting this year is the local count committees, which every county is being urged to take up. Some have said yes to it, and it comes along with that financial support and the training that goes along with that familiar face that you were talking about, Gwen. But some have said no, and Lincoln County was one of those at the very beginning. They were very suspicious of accepting the money and the requirements that went along with it. But I think that when you're talking about is there enough money to get it done and to get it done properly and reach all of those isolated communities that really do need to be counted, probably not.
We'll see what happens there. With apologies to Casey Kasem, our countdown doesn't stop until we reach the top. But we need a break. We'll be back in a moment.